Football on Off the Ball.
With William Hill, you can boost your winnings on the Sunday game with new Bet Builder Extra. Only with William Hill. Download the app today. 18 plus gamblingcare.ie.
This is News Talk.
Welcome back. So, as you'll have seen, England are champions of Euro 2025. It's the second consecutive Euros that they have won, and the final against Spain was pretty much the story of the knockouts for England. Once again, going behind, but Alessia Russo's equaliser cancelled out Mariona Caldente's equaliser for England against Spain, and another penalty shootout led to Chloe Kelly netting the decisive penalty. Rachel O'Sullivan of Girls on the Ball is with us on the line. Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Very good. Have you transplanted yourself to London to partake in the celebrations?
I haven't actually. I've taken myself off on holiday and gone straight to Italy right after the final on Sunday. So Monday morning I was out of Switzerland.
Beautiful. That's a fantastic decision. England led for 4 minutes and 52 seconds of the entire knockout phase of this tournament. That has to be a first in any major tournament that we've seen in international football.
Yeah, I think there was quite a few firsts. I think probably the first team as well to have to go to extra time in every single knockout match. Penalties twice. So yeah, a pretty incredible display, but they led when it mattered. And I think that's the main thing. It kind of reminded me almost a bit of tennis, you know, like you can win less points in tennis and still somehow win the match. And it felt a little bit like that. Yeah,
the sort of mentality of actually being in the lead against England doesn't ever feel like a safe thing, particularly as this tournament went on. What are you largely pointing to as to the main reason why England have won this thing? Are you looking at Wiegman, a tactical masterclass, particularly against Spain? Are you looking at the heart and the grit that was evident in so many different storylines? Are you looking at a bit of fortune? What are you plucking out first of all here?
I think all of that. I think particularly in the knockout games, every bit of that was on display in some fashion. I absolutely think it was tactical from Wiegman against Spain. I thought it was a real gladiatorial affair of kind of two of the best, showing completely different styles of football and how they can match up against each other and counter each other in many ways. I think tactically against Sweden, the substitutes were incredible to be, 2-0 down in 79th minute and come back to equalise and get it back into extra time was incredible. That was depth, that was grit, that was resilience. I think, the game definitely didn't really go to plan to a degree against Italy. I mean, I think in terms of game plan, they were doing the right things. They just were not executing in the final third, and that's where it mattered. And I think the grit and resilience and determination was on display there when Michel Ajimang came on in the 86th minute and was able to score 10 minutes later with that decisive goal to drag it back and push that game into extra time. And I think for England, once they get a handle back in that game, like get a hand back on the game, it's almost like they don't believe that they're not going to win it now. They just believe once we're back in it, there's no way we're letting it go.
For me, one of the things that came to mind on Sunday was the Champions League final and Arsenal doing a bit of a number on Barcelona. I've seen the Nations League clash between England and Spain mentioned as well. Are they real two touch points that you can refer back to that we saw almost as a sign that this might go in a similar direction if these two teams were to meet in the Euros?
I think if you told me that at the beginning of the tournament, then yes, you'd definitely point to that. I think it would show that both teams know how to beat each other. I think having gone through the tournament, you'd start to question, would England be able to pull out that kind of display in the final when it mattered? But then I think perhaps we underestimated the impact of the way that they got through the tournament and how that galvanised the squad. And it was almost like it didn't really matter what happened, they still believed that they could win it. So they know how to beat Spain, Spain know how to beat them. Spanish fans will point to the fact that the game in February, they were missing key players. You could say the exact same thing about the game in June, that England was missing key players. So lots of little mind games, lots of little, revenge narratives. England obviously dumped them out of Euro 2022. Spain went and beat England in the final of the World Cup. So, as it went, it was Spain win, England win, Spain will win, England win. Spain won last. It seemed it was just going to happen, that England were somehow going to win this one.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, like the way in which England did it, because something we'll chat about is the theme of Englishness, which seems to be emanating through a lot of the words that we've seen over the last couple of days. There's going to be honours lined up for a couple of these players, as we've seen, and the idea of national pride has been mentioned quite a bit. in the aftermath. We were having this chat last week with Ciara Grant about how sometimes you can just take a general idea of a nation's football and it seems to permeate through all the different teams, the women's team, the men's team. I think we were having this conversation after Italy basically did Norway in one of the first knockout games of this tournament, that it's such an Italian thing to do. But this England thing flies in the face of the English idea overall, I would argue. Like, if you compare this with the men's team, this is not how the men's team would go about winning a tournament. They would crumble in these sorts of situations. Now, I know that they've got a little bit better at penalty shootouts in recent tournaments, but I don't know, this idea of a national idea of English football, this feels like a bit of a breakthrough.
It feels like something they grabbed onto during the tournament, and we heard it a lot as media, proper English, like we're doing this the proper English way, and it was almost like that was something they were telling themselves in camp. It was a mantra they were using to really drive them forward and say, we know it's been tough, but this is the way we do it and this is the way we're going to win. And perhaps it's something that they want to drive into English football, that it doesn't matter, where you might feel down and out, you don't drop your heads, you don't think we're out of this. And perhaps that's something that not only do they, use for themselves to get them through the competition, but perhaps they want to permeate down through English football. So rather than seeing, stepping up to penalties and think, oh God, we know how these go for an English team, actually they're maybe shifting that narrative. They've never lost a penalty shootout under Serena Beman. So I think maybe they're trying to shift that, what proper English is when it comes to football. And I think English fans would rather than play like that, perhaps, than they have in previous tournaments, for sure. Yeah,
and there are a ton of different storylines that you can use to actually illustrate this. Lucy Bronze and the leg fracture is probably the main storyline.
Yeah, I thought I misread that when I heard it post-match, but at the same time does perfectly sum up Lucy Bronze. She's often spoken about the fact that her middle name is Tough, because she is half Portuguese, and that does seem to be perfect for Lucy Bronze. She's very much the kind of player who will drag this team by the scruff of the neck through matches. Sometimes she feels that she kind of gets into an I'll do it myself mode. That can backfire sometimes. We saw that in the World Cup. And actually, I think England recognised how impactful she could be when she did invert and step forward. But they knew what to do in that situation and knew how to cover her in that situation. And it allowed her to impact the game more. So I think when you've got players like that, it's about mentality, it's about confidence, and that bleeds into the team. You can see her during the penalty shootouts. She is one of the most confident players, regardless of what happens. And yes, we talk about that ridiculous leg fracture, but I think back to that moment in the Sweden game in extra time. Hannah Hampton was down, her nose was bleeding. Alex Greenwood was having to have her shoulder manipulated. Don't know what happened there, but it didn't look very pleasant. Physios were busy. Lucy Bronze was down taping up her own leg. And then when it came to the penalty and she had to get up and kind of step up and take a pretty decisive penalty to keep England in it, she tore off that leg bandage as she walked up and then absolutely smashed it down the middle. And it just, it summarised that kind of gritty kind of performance that maybe the rest of the team were able to be inspired by.
If anybody's not sure, you're not joking when you say that Lucy Bronze's middle name is Tough. This is a literal fact.
That's her middle name, yeah.
What's the genesis of that? Is that is it a Portuguese translation of something else?
I'm not. I think it's her mom's maiden name, if I'm not wrong. So but it seems pretty appropriate.
I mean, nominative determinism, I think, is the idea there. That's absolutely extraordinary. Like, we were commenting on the fact after the England-Sweden game, I think it was TalkSport or someone had Terry Butcher on, which probably suggests just how this England team is totally in the zeitgeist right now, that they're bringing out, somebody else who's been through a very famous bloody battle in their career. But actually, Lucy Bronze has one-upped Hannah Hampton, not only with her injury, but also by saying it's absolutely no one in a public sphere until after the whole thing is done.
I'm amazed that they managed to keep that under wraps, because, it's definitely something the team would have known. She said she did it in June. Fran Kirby knew about it, and Fran Kirby had stepped away from the England team. So, that's a pretty well-guarded secret. I'm pretty impressed that didn't somehow leak out. And she didn't ever look like someone who had a fracture in her tibia. So, pretty incredible.
How much credit is Serena Beman getting for the tactical masterclass on Sunday?
Oh, I think for Sunday's game, absolutely. She is getting credit for that. I think, people like to say that she never changes things around. And yes, there were very few changes perhaps in the starting lineup for this final, but Jess Carter did come back in. She did switch Lauren Hemp and Lauren James. She put Lauren Hemp on the right, which was unusual. Two reasons for that. They wanted that extra defensive cover for Lucy Bronze, who does like to get forward, but equally she wanted her wingers to be able to invert more and have balls from the left coming in on a right foot and vice versa to try and, provide those more direct options into the box, but also at times be able to pack out the midfield. So there was definite things and tweaks that were done, which I thought were very impressive, and I think maybe didn't allow Spain's midfield to perhaps dominate the game as many expected. You look at someone like Patry, who's been absolutely unbelievable for Spain. She had the third lowest, a number of her stats were down at the third lowest in terms of passes out and connecting passes and stuff like that, because England managed to pack out that midfield and try and limit what they were doing. So yeah, tactically, I think Serena Beman got it spot on. The thing is, it's still never going to be perfect against Spain, because Spain are so good. They're always going to dominate the ball. But I think the way that England defended, you look at the number of shots Spain created versus England, it was something like 22-8. Both of them had 5 shots on target. And I think that's, down to, yes, there were some misses and some potential glaring misses, I think, from Spain, but equally there was some very, very good defensive display. And you look at Williamson and Carter, they committed, I think, 2 fouls between them in the entirety of the 120 minutes, which is pretty impressive given how much time Spain maybe spent in England's box.
Exactly. And like you touch on the misses there, and that is partly attributable to the statistic, but 22 shots, 5 of them on target from Spain. Like, again, you are kind of thinking back to the Champions League final in terms of Arsenal's area being under constant threat without there ever being a string of clear-cut opportunities. It feels that England are quite comfortable in this sort of place where if the opposition are going to have 65% of the ball, totally fine, we can deal with this, but we'll give them low chance opportunities.
Yeah, and you have to recognise that that's not England's normal game. I think other than Spain obviously had the most possession on average in the tournament. England were second in that statistic. So they definitely had to change the way that they play football in order to set up against Spain. And I think, yes, normally we often see when England plays Spain, they're happy to sit back to a degree. They try and defend from the front, but they're more inclined to kind of force Spain into those longer shots from outside the box. I did think it was interesting when Claudia Pina came on, because she is someone who can absolutely ping a ball from quite a distance. We saw a number of wonderful goals from her this tournament from about 20-25 yards out, but still England were able to adapt and kind of close down those spaces. So yeah, I think being switched on for 120 minutes in a game like that, where it's quick feet, not having the ball, yeah, I think it was a very, very impressive display. Is
there a sense from the Spanish camp in the aftermath that they were somehow the victims of a great footballing injustice, that a team...
Of course, yeah.
What were they saying?
100%. Always is. They were the better team. They created more chances. They played the nicer football. They dominated the game from 70 minutes on. That England play acted, which I thought was quite funny, given I was sat right in front of both the Patry and the Paredes dive, which was quite funny to watch in real time. So yeah, look, it's happened before. It happened after the quarterfinal. It happened after the Barcelona Champions League game against Arsenal. Possession is a wonderful thing, and if you can play with that much possession, that's fantastic, but ultimately you need to score goals, and they had 120 minutes to do that, and they just got the one.
Is there a greater question about Spain at this point that they might eventually start asking themselves? Like, it's a tentative question because they're world champions and they've got such an array of talent, but they still can't get their hands on this trophy.
I don't think so. I think, Spain have improved dramatically in quite a short space of time. They'd never been to a Euros final before. So they beat Germany for the first time. They got to a Euros final for the first time. So I know we kind of expect them now to be winning everything since winning the World Cup and the Nations League. But realistically, they're still quite young in their journey. So yes, they'll be disappointed. The fans will be disappointed. Many of us expected them to get their hands on the trophy, but I don't think they're going to dip in any way, shape or form. And if anything, they're just going to improve. You only need to look at some of the youngsters coming through who had wonderful performances. I touched on Pina, Vicky Lopez. They've got some great talent coming through. So I don't think it's going to be too dug into, to be totally honest. Whether Montitome carries on, I'm not sure. We'll see. But ultimately, they're absolutely stacked, and I've no doubt they will win a Euros tournament. The difference is, I think tactically, the women's game is evolving very quickly as well, and you're seeing more teams able to put together a game plan to play up against a style like that. It's just a case of having a fit enough, disciplined enough team to be able to carry it out for 90 plus minutes.
And the depth is important there as well, and that's obviously something England have worked on over the past couple of years. Like, it's really interesting now to consider what the legacy of this is on a couple of the individual careers in this English team. We'll chat about Ajimang in a minute, and who knows what the ceiling on her career might be like. But you look at somebody like Leah Williamson now, and just a 2025 of dreams really for her, like a 3 or 4 months of dreams for Leah Williamson, like automatically into one of the all-time greats as a result of this year, because, you know, you win back-to-back tournaments in this competition, and it's just an amazing star beside your name.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I think maybe hard to wrap our heads around, you know, as people who live in England, how this might impact the game there. We saw the impact of it from 2022, but even looking at the difference in the celebrations for this win in the last 3 years, Trafalgar Square, I think a number of thousands, I think 7,000 turned out for that trophy parade. Today, they had it down the mall outside Buckingham Palace, and I've seen 65,000 floating around of people who line the mall to see the trophy lift. So that just gives you an idea of how women's football is permutating it into society more and more. You know, I've had a couple of media requests to come on and ask me, is this the moment that women's football has broken through? And I'm like, where have you been the last 3 or 4 years? This isn't the moment. The moment's been. This is, you know, a movement at this stage. Yeah.
It's interesting you are getting those requests, though. Like, I presume these are from like more mainstream outlets that aren't maybe sports specific, and I don't know, forgot that 2022 ever happened.
Yeah, perhaps it's the outlets that are somewhat bandwagon jumping, I suppose. But also I do think those narratives tend to be the types of headlines that get the views and the clicks, and people want to jump on and tell you why it's not the moment and why women's football's crap. So there are some of those kind of counter arguments that get brought into those requests. So tend to avoid them, to be totally honest.
Movement is a good phrase, and look, we'll get back to England in just a moment, but it's impossible not to look at this with a little bit of an Irish angle, and just seeing, as you say, a movement, direction of travel, 100% undeniably going one way. And it's just, again, just so frustrating that Ireland are on the outside looking in on this, and like the work that England have done in terms of that production line has come to fruition in terms of the depth that we've spoken about. And look, we've spoken at length in the past about Spain and where they are, these machines that are now in European football. And it really does feel that if their momentum is to be analysed, Ireland's momentum relative to 2023 also does as well, which doesn't seem overly optimistic.
Yeah, I think when you look at some of these teams that are creating this kind of legacy, it goes right down to youth levels and the youth pathways and the investment that they've put into those pathways, and the desire to have a real connection between youth levels right up to senior. You're seeing that with Spain with their style of football. That is a Spanish style. They're playing that from as young as they can walk. England are trying to develop something like that. They've got a very robust pathway that they've worked very hard on. I think that's an area Ireland need to work on, is developing more of a pathway so that you're not losing players from under 19s if they're not quite making the senior squad, for example. There needs to be somewhere for them to go. You know, it is all relative. We're a smaller country. We've got other sports as well that people want to play and young kids want to play, which I obviously accept. But I think I think there's massive respect to the coverage of this tournament from broadcasters in Ireland as well. You know, when you're not at a tournament and you're still willing to put it on TV so that it's visible for people to see and young kids to watch and to know that it's something that they can aspire to. I do think deserves respect, because you don't get that from a lot of countries in Europe, and some countries who were even here sent very few media who were actually at the Euros. So, you know, there's other ways and other things that can be done to try and help support that.
It was an amazing tournament, right?
Yes, yeah. Tough, tiring tournament, beautiful country, but 9 p.m. kickoffs were definitely a challenge in Europe, I think. Switzerland did a brilliant job at packing out the stadiums. We questioned the size of the stadiums beforehand. I think from a fan perspective, It was great. I would have liked to see maybe the semi-finals and the finals in bigger stadia, but they don't have bigger stadia. I mean, from a media perspective, it was tight for media. I think that was probably the only issue with the smaller stadiums. But did a brilliant job, did a great job of kind of tapping into the Swiss fans, developing an incredible fan base across this tournament. 25,000 of them marched from the centre of Bern to the stadium ahead of the Switzerland-Spain quarter-final, which is incredible. So hopefully that's something that has sparked to life women's football in the country, because it's not hugely developed there. And hopefully they'll be able to capitalise on their team making history.
Yeah, and again, when England look back on this, there's no bad way to win a major tournament, but the way in which they did it was extraordinary. If you had to pick the moment that'll be remembered for England, is it Ajimang's goal? Is it the chaotic penalty shootout against Sweden and the slightly chaotic but less chaotic one against Spain? What are you picking out?
I think I'd rather forget the shootout against Sweden, if I'm honest. I think for me, the most memorable moment is Michelle Ajimang scoring in the 96th minute. Yeah, I think that blew the top off the roof of the stadium. I managed to capture a wonderful photo of the bench. You know, I think when you even look at Serena Beman, who's normally quite a reserved character, quite quiet, keeps her emotions in check. She was very different this tournament. Absolutely exploded with the rest of the players on the bench and the families behind the bench when that goal went in. And yeah, her story is incredible, Michelle Ajimang. She was somewhat of a rogue choice, a little bit of a surprise that she was chosen to come, because I don't think many of us would have predicted that. And then on top of that, whether she'd even get minutes. So the fact that she's been turned to in pretty much every game, even against France when they were 2-0 down, she was the player that Serena Beman turned to, is incredible for a 19-year-old. And to score two key goals, the goal that got them level with Sweden in the quarterfinals and the goal that kept them in the semi-final in the last 40 seconds, 30 seconds of the game. Like, you can't write stories like that.
What did she do to force her way into the reckoning in terms of the available players on match day?
Firstly, her first call-up was when England were playing Belgium back in April. They went 3-0 down. Michelle Ajimang came on and scored within 40 seconds in her first cap. So, you know, she's been unbelievable for the under-19s. You know, she's played at under-23 levels as well. She's definitely one that they had an eye on. But I think maybe perhaps this tournament we all thought might come too soon for her. I think what she shows is an incredible, obviously, goal-scoring ability, but she's very mature on the ball, has really excellent hold-up play, very intelligent player, and very, very calm in big moments and big situations. And when she came on for England, a number of times she was playing in they changed the formation and they were playing with two up front, and she was very, very effective in a two, a different profile of striker to, say, an Alessia Russo. And it gave defences all sorts of problems trying to work out what to do with that. So she knew her role and was confident in what she could deliver, and yeah, I think blew a lot of people away.
In terms of what we can expect from her in the future, what's your understanding of how far she can go and how great she's going to be?
I think she will be one of the greats for England without question. You know, when we get around to the 2027 World Cup, I'm hoping she'll be allowed to play the Under-20s World Cup. I think getting as much international experience into her as possible will be super valuable, but I don't know, maybe the seniors will want to hang on to her and protect her. I understand that too, but I think for her to be able to achieve what she did in her first senior tournament is only going to give her huge confidence. I think it's really important that she plays in the WSL. You know, whether Arsenal hang on to her, maybe they will, but it would also be great to see her as a starting striker for a WSL team and get regular minutes. I think that will massively boost her even further.
Is the sense that she probably wouldn't get that with Arsenal this season?
Probably not with Alessia Russo. I could imagine her being potentially that super sub for Arsenal, but Arsenal are in the Champions League. They'll want to go far in the FA Cup and every domestic competition, so they will need that depth. You know, I don't know if Stina Blackstenius stays, perhaps she'll go out on loan again. But, you know, I'm sure Arsenal would very much like to hang on to the star this season.
The story of this tournament for England might also focus a little bit on the adversity before the tournament as well. It's not been a seamless transition from World Cup to Euros, and even losing your first game at the Euros as well is a pretty poor start. But things such as the Team GB side at the Olympic Games in 2024, a couple of surprising Nations League defeats, also Mary Earp's Frank Kirby retiring from international football, Millie Bright withdrawing herself from selection. This was not a straightforward process for Serena Beman to go back to back with this England squad.
No, absolutely not. And I spoke to a number of players in the lead up, former players in the lead up to this tournament, and a lot of them felt that that adversity was going to galvanise the team. That, you know, people, while there was expectation, I think with all of what you've listed, perhaps the expectation wasn't as assured as it maybe was in 2022, where people were like, we're going to win this home tournament, it's going to be amazing. I think perhaps there was that trepidation, especially when they got drawn into the group of death and everything else that they'd have to deal with. No one really knew how that was going to impact them in a tournament. And then when you saw the first game, you thought, okay, it's going to impact them really badly. But actually, it was almost like a wake-up call. And I think England are good when their backs are against the wall, and losing that first game almost made every single game a knockout game that they had to win. So yeah, I think it's definitely galvanised them. It's given them a new challenge. And I think for Serena Beman, yeah, another challenge for her. I mean, this is since 2013, she's the only person who's won the Euros. Like, which is crazy to say. She won it with the Netherlands in 2017 and England now the last two. She's definitely faced a lot of challenges in her career, and now she had a new one to face coming into 2025, and I'd say probably one of the most difficult. So yeah, I guess all of those kind of narratives, I guess, show what they've had to go through to win it. And I know a lot of people are wanting to say that it was luck, but I don't think you can win 3 knockout games in the way that they did and just put it down purely to luck.
Yeah, as you said at the very start, there's probably a little bit of column A, B, C, etc., etc. Rachel, congrats on a great tournament yourself. A well-earned holiday. Enjoy that as well. We'll chat to you soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Football on Off the Ball.
With William Hill, you can boost your winnings on the Sunday game with new Bet Builder Extra. Only with William Hill. Download the app today. 18 plus gamblingcare.ie.
This is News Talk.